Hi, everybody. Hi, Mira.
What is
Hi,
your,
Bella.
can
Hi,
you
Karen.
have to state,
I
tell me
see
what your
Luda's
name
there.
is, your daughter's name is. Look in there.
Yocheved.
Boker Tov.
How do you pronounce it? How do you spell it?
Yochev. Why? I'll write it.
Oh, be careful because my girlfriend told me that West Fire, Nile fire is.
West Nile
Yeah,
virus.
it's very, very fast.
Thank you.
Hey, Lana. How are you?
Yes, that's what she said.
Welcome,
Stay
everybody.
outside. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, because
Really?
Will you be quarantined when you go to Maryland? Okay.
I have to go get tested. If you're hard of hearing, sit up there.
I'm not hard of hearing. Do I need to grab a
This
pen?
girl is new. Her name is Hilda. Okay?
Yes, I
New.
know.
I heard that the lines are fairly long for testing
Sorry to
because
say,
of the outbreak.
I don't believe. I
In
know somebody,
testing.
yeah, somebody got tested 3 times and twice was negative and once was positive.
I forgot your name.
Were there symptoms?
No,
Good to see you.
My friend's son caught COVID from someone who was asymptomatic who he gave a hug to.
no hard.
She went off to college, right? And before she went off to college, very affectionate in this family, and he gave her a hug and she gave him a hug.
Ladies!
And once he got
Hi, Cynthia.
funny. He said who he had been in contact with to get COVID. She got sick. She had it. She said
All
she-
right, ladies, we are going to get started.
Oh, no,
We
no.
are going to welcome our in-person.
Yeah,
No,
didn't you say
it was
your
a
son had your?
friend's son. It was a friend's son.
Did
Not
We're
mine.
waiting.
the friend get it? Yes, he did.
The
We're
friend's
gonna
son
get
got it.
started, everybody.
The friend did not. No.
Sandy and Greta, we're gonna start. We're gonna welcome our in-person participants. We've got
I
Greta.
know this is beautiful,
Sandy.
but can I see everybody?
Yes,
please?
sure.
Yeah, it's okay.
We've got her and welcome Hilda, right? And Abby and Renee, Rena, Rivka, and Rachla. Can't resist calling you by your Jewish name. And then we've got our Zoom participants. We've got Luda, which I don't know where you are, Luda. We've got Karen and Gittel and Cynthia and Mira and Bella. And there you are, Gittel. And we've got Bonnie. And I don't know who SBS is, but it might be Rabbi. Welcome, everybody. It's been a
Welcome.
long week. Everybody survived this.
Hello, Mira, my love.
Mira, Abby's saying hi to you.
Hi, Abby. Where are you? Are you outside?
She's
I'm
waving
right
to you.
here, waving at you. You
Where?
recognize me?
You see the screen that has all of us?
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go there.
No. Oh, you're
It's online. I mean, you can see it.
yeah. All right. We are going to get started. We are in the Torah portion of Toldos. And I gotta say, I know I say this every week, but it amazes me each week how every Parsha has so much in it. I'm like, which verse are we gonna talk about today? Because there's so many elements, so many parts of the story that I'm like, which one should we choose? So first of all, let's remind ourselves the one that I forgot. I had my grandmother's bag. I promised I would bring you.
Yeah.
Sitting on my kitchen table. I'll bring it next week. Out of how many books? How many books of the Torah are there? 5. Parsha are we up to? Hi, Maya.
5.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
What number of Parsha are we up to? Let's go ahead to the beginning of our
5.
Chumash. We are on Parsha number 6, where Parsha's told us.
6, right.
And Let's go ahead and open up to our table of contents. Let's
Oh,
sing our
just a
song.
second, Just a second, 1 minute, 1 minute, just a second. I wanna record the tune.
Oh, I'll send you a private WhatsApp.
Okay, beautiful.
All right, ladies, let's go. Bereshis Noach lech
Lech
lecha
lecham.
vayerach Toldos. That's where we are today. Toldos. Bereshis Noach lech lecha vayerach Sarah Toldos. Vayetze vayishlach vayeshev miketz vayigash vayechi. So that is the first book, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 parshiot in Chumash Bereshis, and we are on number 5. We're in sync with the times. And like the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, always used to say, "Ben darf leben mit der Zeit." We have to live with the times. And what that means is, what is the Torah portion telling us this week? There's a message. There's a message for us. So we truly, Bereshis in general, the whole Chumash Bereshis is filled with so many stories, and in each parsha there are many stories within each parsha. But just to bring us up to date, we started off in Parshas Bereshis with the creation of the world, and it ends off with the birth of Noah. 10 generations later, Adam to Noah was 10 generations. In Parshas Noah, we go to Noah and the ark. That whole story, the Tower of Babel. We move on to, we're introduced at the end of Parshas Noach to Avram, the first Jew, the one who introduced monotheism to the world and made this revolution. Then in Parshas Lech Lecha, we are introduced to Avram at the age of 75, where it goes through the test where Hashem says to leave his home, his father's home, Ela Eretz Asher Arecha, to the land that I'm going to show you. And we move on to Parshas Vayera and Chayei Sarah, where it's all about Avram. All the experiences of Avram, the angels that came to visit him, he had his bris milah, all the different tests that he went through, the binding of Isaac, that Kedas Yitzchak. It goes through the angels that came to visit him and told him about the destruction of Sodom. We spoke about that a couple weeks ago, about Sodom, Lot's wife who turned into the pillar of salt. And we move on to last week's portion where his wife Sarah passes away, Chayei Sarah. And after his wife passes away, that is when he sends his messenger, Eliezer, to find the wife for Yitzchak. And we know the story of how we found the wife for Yitzchak. What was her name? Rebecca or Rivka, and the whole story of the camels. I've been thinking a lot about our class last week about unconditional love. That was our topic last week. And we end off last week's Torah portion, Parshas Chayei Sarah, where that's in Toldos. We end off where Avram passes away in last week's Torah portion. Okay, that's where we're last week. So this week, Parshas Toldos, the word Toldos. Does anyone know what the word Toldos means?
Twins.
What is it?
Twins?
Friends? No.
Twins. Twins, like,
No.
I thought it meant twins.
Twins? Okay.
Hi.
What is the word? Hi, Leona. What is the word Toldos mean? That's the name of the parsha. Anybody? Descendants. Very good, Gittel. Hey, Robin. Hey, Rita. Welcome. That is right. The descendants or the offspring, the children of. It's okay, Leona. You could sit there. I don't believe you're blocking. Here, go ahead. If you just sit down. So we start off where it describes the descendants of Yitzchak. Okay. Now Avram. What do you need? Oh, Avram passes away, and Yitzchak and Rivka are married, and they endure 20 years. This is the parsha in a nutshell. 20 years of being childless. 20 years she cannot have.
That's a long time.
Yes.
Until they're actually a lot of.
Nowadays it's skipping a life.
Actually, something very interesting.
You're frozen.
Were barren, had a difficult time conceiving. Sarah had a baby at
90
years old.
Yes.
Rivka, after 20 years of being childless. Rachel, was childless for many years until she finally had Yosef and Binyamin. So it's actually interesting how a lot of our matriarchs battled with infertility.
It wasn't your
And-
problem, though.
It's no, it's
Wasn't what?
It
it's
wasn't her problem.
whose problem?
Your problem. You had a
No,
lot of
oh.
children. You had a lot of children.
So each child is its own miracle.
It's wonderful.
So which is interesting on its own. And what goes on to what we actually see in the beginning of the parsha is that Rivka conceives and she has twins. The first twins in the world that were born that are noted,
Wow.
which were Yaakov, Jacob, and Esav. And there's so many wonderful focuses in this parsha that talk so many unbelievable lessons where this righteous couple, Yitzchak and Rivka, they have Jacob, who is righteous and a tzaddik and into Torah and learning and spirituality. And we have Esav, who was a hunter and was very materialistic. And they argued from the time that they were in the womb. And the whole story that goes on is about how Esav grows into be this cunning hunter, a man of the field. And Yaakov is known as the wholesome one. He's the one who dwelled in the tents of learning. And it says that Isaac favors Esav and Rivka favors Yaakov. And again, there's so much discussion about nurture versus nature. You know, 2 children, 1 family, complete opposites. What did Rivka see in Yaakov? What did Yitzchak see in Esav? Story of selling of the birthright. That's a whole fascinating discussion on its own. Yitzchak wanted to give the blessing from his father Avram of who would be the Jewish people, and Esav was the one, and he was deserving of the blessing. And they made that whole deal with, if you're familiar, where he sold his birthright one day to Esav, sold it to Yaakov over a bowl of soup, and then came the time for the blessing, and Yitzchak wanted to bless, and Rivka helped Yaakov be hairy. He put on some skin of an animal, and Yitzchak said, you guys are familiar with the story? It feels like Esav, but it sounds like Yaakov. In general, what does it mean to sound like Yaakov? What is the sound of someone who is refined? The touch of someone who's not refined? There's just like a wealth of information. I really encourage you every single week to really, even if you spend 10 minutes a day or once or twice a week, in addition to this class, reading about the Torah portion, you will find a wealth of messages that are so timeless for our life today. And this parsha, how Avraham about wells that Yitzchak dug. You know, there's a lot of discussion about wells. Avram dug wells, they got stuff. Yitzchak digs wells, and we're going to talk about that. And just so you know, just to give you a full summation of the parsha ends off with Yaakov receiving the blessings from Yitzchak, from his father, and he has to run away because Esav, anger, and he wants to actually kill his brother, so he runs away. And he runs away to his uncle, Rivka's brother, Lavan, and he goes to Haran, where he lives, and he settles there, and that's where he finds his wife Rachel, his wife Leah. They have the 12 tribes. That's already next week's parsha. But I wanted to give you the nutshell of what this Torah portion is, but to tell you that today we're going to focus on one part of the Torah portion, which actually is a lesser spoken about, which is the story of the well. You're with me? Of the well. So that was the summation of the portion.
Is that where he met his future wife?
So Greta points out this thing, is that where he met his future wife? Interestingly enough, a lot about Yitzchak's life was about wells. And we're going to talk about this. He met his wife at the well. He got married. He lived near a well.
Jacob.
Yitzchak. Yaakov also met his wife at the well.
You're talking about?
I'm talking about Isaac, Yitzchak,
Okay,
yes.
I'm sorry.
But Yaakov,
Pronunciation
Jacob
is not-
also met his wife, Rachel and Leah, at the well.
Right.
Wells are very symbolic in
Sounds
Judaism.
like the club nowadays.
You seem to be
Well,
frozen.
Yitzchak off Parsha, it starts to begin where there was a hunger in the land of Israel. So Yitzchak travels to a place called Gerar, which is today in the Gaza area, and the Plishtim, the Philistines, and stuffed wells that belonged to his father Avraham. Yitzchak comes, he unplugs them, and he gives them names. And they wells, Asek, Sitna, and Rechus. And what happens is after he unplugs the wells of his father, the servants dig another 3 wells. He goes ahead and he moves to a place called Be'er Sheva. Have any of you ever heard of that city, Be'er Sheva? You've been there. You've heard of it.
What is it?
Be'er Sheva, it's called, or Be'er Sheva. Okay, anybody here in Zoom has heard of that? Be'er Sheva. And it's very peaceful. And what happens is the servants of Yitzchak go ahead and they build a 7th well. So you understand, he unplugs Avram's wells. The servants build 3 wells. And then when everything's nice and peaceful, they build a 7th well.
May I
And
ask you, how do you unplug a well?
dig it.
So in other words.
They
it was
stuffed it with dirt.
filled in
Correct.
They
with
stuffed it with dirt.
dirt. So
They
it's
unplug it.
now,
Unplug.
excavated again.
Yes. And
Okay.
in general, today as well, but especially in those days, the well was the source of their water. That was the only way they had water. So the stuffing of the wells was like cutting off a life supply.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that. And what happens is the king of the Plishtim, Avimelech, he travels from Gerar, this place where he had dug up the wells, and he travels to Yitzchak, and he's seeking peace. And Yitzchak says, what can I do? How can I help you? He says, why? Avimelech says, I see that God is with you. I want to make a peace treaty. I want to make an oath that we're going to be peaceful amongst each other for the future. Yitzchak makes a big feast, and they each swear that there's going to be peace from now on. They're going to be respectful of their boundaries. And if you look into chapter 26, verse number 30, which for those of you that have the orange chumash, that is on page 167.
Chapter 26, right?
Page 167, chapter 26, verse number 30. And if you're with me, page 167, verse number 30. You see where it says number 30? A little number 30 on page 167. Yitzchak made a feast for them, and they ate and they drank. They got up early, verse 31 in the morning, and swore an oath with each other. Yitzchak sent them off, and they went away in peace. Then on the same day, Yitzchak's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug. They said to him, we have found water. He named it Shiva, which is an oath. That's what the word Shiva means. The city is therefore called Be'er Sheva to this very day. That's the story. You want to know the history of that city in Israel? This is the story right here.
Wow. And it's still Beersheba now?
Yes. Now, archaeologists excavated this region, for those of you that have an interest in this, and it's actually very close to the modern city. They call it Tal Be'er Sheva, connected to the original Be'er Sheva. And if you can Google it or go visit Israel, you'll see tons of excavations where they actually found tons of wells in this area.
Wow.
Now, the word Be'er Sheva, what does Be'er mean? Be'er means a well. Sheva, Be'er Sheva. So there's two explanations. According to Rashi and the Radak and many commentaries, Shiva means an oath, right? Shiva means an oath. They swore, they had this oath, and based on this covenant that they had between each other, there would be peace. Adia Separno, a different commentary, that the reason it's called Be'er Sheva, Harry, I think you just mentioned, what is Sheva? 7. You know Hebrew. The word Sheva means 7. Now, why did he name this well Be'er Sheva? Because it was the 7th well that Yitzchak had dug. He unplugged the first 3 from Avraham. Then then the servants dig out the extra 3 wells, and then this was the number 7. So this is the reason of why it's called Be'er Sheva. Now, we see that there are many structures in Be'er Sheva that, according to archaeologists, are actually from the time of our matriarchs and our patriarchs. But the Torah doesn't say that. There's something very interesting here. The Torah doesn't tell. The Torah makes it sound like the name is fresh off the press, right? There was an oath. There was the 7th well. That's why it's named Be'er Sheva. But do you know that in 2 portions ago, just a generation back, his father Avraham, what was he digging? Wells that were his father's, Avraham. What happened? We can actually find it if you go back in Parshas Vayera, chapter 21, 28. That is, chapter 21 is on page number, 2 portions ago. It's on page number 121. Go back, page 121, Parshas Vayera, chapter 21, verse number 28. Just raise your hand if you have it. Page 121,
Place 7 female.
verse number 28.
Abraham placed 7.
What happened over here, before we read inside, is
Did he make
there
an oath
was
too?
a whole problem, the same problem.
Exactly.
They stuffed his wells, and the servants of Avram comes to Avimelech, and he says, Avimelech, I don't understand. These are my wells. And Avimelech says, I didn't know, one of those stories. And he says, well, what's the deal? So Avram says, they have a whole discussion. And he says, don't worry, I'm so sorry. They make a big peace treaty. They have an oath. They have a ceremony. In fact, if we read on verse 28, Avram placed 7 female lambs by themselves. Avimelech said to Avram, what are these 7 female lambs which you have placed by hand as proof that I have dug the well? And the place was therefore named Be'er Sheva, well of the oath, because the 2 of them took an oath. They formed a covenant in Be'er Sheva. So this is very confusing. Let's go back to our where we are now on page 167, back in Parsha Toldos. If Avram did this whole war, I think I froze. Did I freeze? No.
No, you're moving.
If I'm moving,
What?
this is very confusing. If Avram did this whole story before, he already had the covenant and the oath and the swearing with Avimelech.
With the same person.
Same person, mind you. Okay? How does it come 2 parshas later in Parshas Toldos and say that Yitzchak did it? Yitzchak was the one that named it. And not only that, if you look at the verse, the city is therefore called Be'er Sheva till this day. I don't understand. Why would Yitzchak give a name that already was? Makes it sound like it's a brand new name. It's like the Torah it's a very hard question to understand, because the Torah itself makes it sound like it didn't just say it 2 parshas ago. It makes it sound like it's a brand new situation.
I never noticed.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
By the fact, see, there was actually 2. One was Avram's Be'er Sheva in one location, and one was Yitzchak's Be'er Sheva in another location. That's a simple commentary that they say there's 2 different Be'er Shevas. But the Separno that originally tells us that it's called Be'er Sheva because it was the 7th well, not because it was the oath, right? Remember I gave you 2 explanations before. Why was it called Be'er Sheva? One, because it was the place of the oath one because it was a place that it was the seventh well. The Saperno was Adia Saperno. He lived in the year 1476. He was an Italian Jew. And
Yeah, it sounds like soprano. So that's right.
he gives, he says something ingenious. If you look at the difference of the well, it's not the exact same name.
One has a large S and one has a small S.
In the English? Okay, but what about the Hebrew?
I don't know.
Well, anyone here read Hebrew? No. If you look at the Be'er Sheva of Avraham, it's with a segel, a kamatz, shava. Shava means to swear. If you look at here in our Chumash, Toldos, that the city is called Be'er Sheva till today, that is with a segel, Sheva. Which name stuck, the Saperno says? Not Avram's Be'er Sheva, the well of the oath. The name that it is today, the one that was permanent, was Be'er Sheva, the one that it was named because it was 7. It's very interesting. You're following me so far? This is like a Jewish.
7 and
We're getting there. We're getting there.
could you show us?
In the Chumash, sure. In the Hebrew, if you look at page 166 on the 4th to bottom line, page and the Hebrew, page 166 on the 4th to bottom line, the second to last word says Sheva. Do you see it? Are you ladies, am I frozen on Zoom?
Gets frozen very often.
Am I, is it good now?
Now it's good.
The second to last word on the 4th to bottom line on page 166, you see there, it says the word Sheva. The other one says Shava. No, that's the kamatz. The segel is this one.
The 3 dots.
The 3 dots.
Whatever 3 dots.
It's in the last. Then I'm not on the right.
Last. Hold on. I'll show you.
You'll show her it's on page 166, 4th to bottom line, second to last word. It has Sheva. Sheva.
Is it with a shin?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Is it shin?
In Bet Ayin. And you see the dots on top?
I don't see anything beginning with shin.
No, neither do I.
There's Sheva. Okay.
Hold on.
Oh, that's not
Oh,
the
we're
last.
not, we're
That's
looking
the,
down here.
yeah, this is,
That's
okay, I
actual
see it.
1, 2, 3,
You got it?
4.
Yes.
It's a
And
four.
then second to last.
Second to last
Sheva.
word. I was has second
You
to
know,
last
Bulgarian-
line.
In Bulgarian, we
I
have
got it.
sh. Yeah, that's why for me it's easy to understand what Sheva.
What the actual shin is.
next to it, she knows Hebrew. right?
Sheva. Correct.
No, I don't.
So we see over here that Be'er Sheva, the name that lasted was the Be'er Sheva of Yitzchak, not of
And
Avraham.
then 121.
Now, this leaves us with the question is, why did Yitzchak have to add this element of 7? In other words, Yitzchak's name of Be'er Sheva incorporated both. What was he adding with the idea that it was the number 7? Can you just say it's the same name?
Is it a completion? 7 is completion.
7 has a certain sense of completion.
Hashem, the day of rest, isn't it all about Hashem?
Well, the number 7 in Judaism in general is an unbelievable number. Everything comes in 7s. The 7 years of Shemitah, when the land rests, and the 7th year it rests, the day of rest, completion.
Right.
8 is above nature. But the question more is not what's so interesting about the number 7, but more about the fact that Yitzchak's name lasted and Avram's didn't. In fact, interestingly enough, if you go back to Parshas Vayera, it says, and Avram called the name Be'er Sheva. Here, what does it say? It says, He named it Shiva.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking at the wrong.
What
Oh, yeah.
What
Yeah,
page?
On page 166, on page 167.
Oh, and then the city.
He
Named it.
therefore called Beersheba to this day, meaning the focus is more that the Torah calls it Beersheba for the rest of eternity. The first time it's like Avram gave the name, it was more an active role. Here it's more like the Torah calls it, Yitzchak is more passive. So what's interesting though, Yitzchak's
What does
name lasted.
Beersheba mean? What is the bear before?
Bear means well.
Oh, okay.
So the Radah, one of the famous commentaries, he gives an answer that what happened with Yitzchak is really a repeat with what happened to his father. In other words, Avram had this problem. They dug his wells, then he undug it, and they made a peace treaty. What happens the second time? Same story with Yitzchak. Same story happens again with Yitzchak. The same story happens with the child. So that's that's why the story stuck the second time. The first time, and it's because it was a repetition of the same story, the name stuck. But the question is, why does it only endure with Yitzchak? In other words, just because it happened again, we dig deeper. Why only did Yitzchak's name stick? And one interpretation that I read was about Avram named it just on his area. Yitzchak's was on the whole city. The whole city became Beersheba. But in a sense, that makes the question particular area. I mean, there's a lot of discussion in general about which one was greater, Avram's or Yitzchak's one that stuck. So, like everything in Torah, we know
So the
that
most important is Ikkios.
correct. Every discussion that we have in Torah, look, we read what 4 lines. There's obviously a lesson to teach us something about the essence of something about a lesson in our lives. Yes.
I don't know. When I think of Isaac, I think everything about Isaac is miraculous. The birth of him, the fact that he was to be sacrificed and God intervened in his life specifically. That
Israel.
there's so many powerful things
Hashem didn't
about
let him.
Isaac that were chosen specifically for him and only him. It seems.
Yeah.
Just
It's on a practical level. Yeah. Abby says that she thinks of Isaac, she thinks of Yitzchak, and she thinks of it as something miraculous. We're actually going to discuss that a little bit, not specifically the element of it being miraculous, but bringing out something a little bit different. We have to understand why they eat. Avram gave the name covenant. He said, I'm giving this name Beersheba because you're going to swear that you're not going to touch my wells.
But that was the
But that didn't happen.
Not only didn't happen, it was breached.
Correct.
This compromise, this covenant was breached. It didn't last. And
why is that?
It was broken.
wait one second. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because this is the story of the world. Politics and diplomacy are powerful. They have an important role, but they're not guaranteed. They're not eternal.
Presidents make promises and they don't do it.
It's the letter of this is the way it works. You know, nothing to do talking about just in general, nothing, nobody specific. This is how diplomats work. How many pictures are there? You know, if you think about what happened in with Avram, it's so representative of so much that goes on in this world. How many pictures are there of world leaders shaking hands and many treaties and many promises? But it doesn't mean that they're not important, but there's a lack of endurance in an oath like this. Yitzchak wasn't. He knew that oaths and covenants and treaties and diplomacies is not what's enduring. He that it was the seventh. The fact that post, ladies on Zoom, how is the internet unstable?
Yes.
Yes.
So sorry, I don't know how to fix it. Are you hearing me? Is it very
The
choppy?
wind is really whipping up maybe that.
You freeze.
What is it?
You freeze.
I keep freezing.
Yes.
I-
Not for very long. It freezes for a couple seconds and then you come back.
Okay, sorry. I think it's the wind. It's very, very windy here. And my husband.
I can still follow you. You're
It's
still
okay.
able to be followed.
Okay, okay. So Yitzchak, what happened when he dug that seventh well? He dug that seventh well after the treaty was done. It was, and then they dug. It was representative of the triumph, so to speak, of what happened next. Was there any lasting element from this treaty, so to speak? And Yitzchak, what's interesting, what you mentioned before about Yitzchak's life, that was very specific to him. Yitzchak is, Avram, we know a lot about. I mean, we know so much. His hospitality, the story with Lot, with the angels. I mean, so much about Avram. Everyone knows about the great Avram. With Yitzchak, we know very little. But the main primary story that the Torah tells us about Yitzchak is that he dug wells. Everybody knows Yitzchak dug wells, and he met his bride, like you said, at a well. He lived near a well, and then after he lives there, after he gets married, he digs wells. Wells is very connected to Yitzchak's essence. And here we have a very big fundamental difference between the first two. We have a big difference between Avram and Yitzchak.
Yes.
Avram, what was Avram? Avram was the one who started monotheism. He was the big macher. He made, according to Ram, he was a people's person. According to Rambam, he was the nation. Half the world at that time understood. He would go around and lecture and explain to people the concept of one God. And it says that people came to him and understood and accepted his teachings.
But Isaac did the depth.
He had correct. Avram what made this like revolution. In fact, at the end, when he's bearing Sarah, at the end of Sarah's life, the Hittite says, "You are the Prince of God." The whole world recognized him as this powerhouse. Yitzchak, on the other hand, it seems to be more passive. Think about it. Seems to be more passive. Yitzchak.
Passive, yes.
Because Avram, he's like the celebrity. He is renowned. Everybody knows about Avram. The whole Yitzchak. And by the way, the small stories that we know about Yitzchak also seem a little bit of passive. The sacrifice. It's really Avram's story that Avram sacrificed his son. Even Yitzchak, even his wife, Rivka. The whole story is about Avram sent to find a wife for Yitzchak. The only active part of Yitzchak's life story is that he dug a well.
He's deeper.
He dug a well. And a lot of
Did you say a or many?
he dug wells. Wells. Yes, he unstuffed his
Everybody called him for anything they needed.
couldn't
Even when he was first
That's wonderful.
trying to get out of organizations.
We missed a joke on Zoom.
Rena says was number 7 and he was a plumber. So what's interesting is that there are a lot of revolutions in the world, but how many of them are maintained? To climb a mountain is an excitement. To start let's think of a good example. You start a diet.
Yeah.
When you start a diet, there's an excitement in it. I am going to change my weight. I'm just giving you a small example that most women can relate
Nobody
to.
can relate.
Nobody can relate
Not
to
on this table.
it, right? You start a diet, right? What's the hard? Okay, so it lasts. There's a power. There's an excitement, but everybody knows that keeping off those pounds, right? The maintenance, endurance.
Yes.
That's the hard thing in life because there's no excitement to it. That's when the rain, even that comes from above, you need to dig. You need to find the water within. Was the one that told the secret of internalization. What's in Hasidic philosophy, a pnimi. A pnimi, you ever heard of that word? A pnimi.
A what?
Pnimi.
What's a pini?
Not pnimi, pnimi. Pei nun yud mem yud.
Me.
Pnimi
Me.
means
You
internal.
and me?
No.
The word pnimi stems from the word pnimiyut,
It's a Hebrew
which
word.
means in Hebrew internal,
It's internal.
to mean internal.
Okay, I can understand internal.
And the idea of being an internalist, it says that the job of a chassid, Hasidic philosophy,
The job of a what?
a chassid,
What is that?
a Hasidic
Teacher.
person. Some Hasidim are teachers too. It says that in the Hasidic philosophy, a chassid is a pnimi, which means
Internal.
a person needs to work on themselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, we could actually look at this example from in more recent history, if we want to talk about this idea of internalization. Take, for example, the founder of the Hasidic movement was the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, he was the Avram. He went around from town to town, teaching people, invoking inspiration. And he had an incredible holy energy that woke up the people. They were in a terrible couple hundred years ago. Mom's successor, the Maggid of Mizrich. Many people don't know of the Maggid of Mizrich. The Maggid of Mizrich didn't travel too much. He created the internal infrastructure, so to speak, the vessel for all this unbelievable inspiration that was coming. You know,
So he was like Isaac?
yes,
Okay,
a
I get that.
person can have a lot of great ideas, a lot of great inspiration, but if there's no vessel to catch it, practically and spiritually, then that beautiful spiritual energy is not going to last. It's an inspiration. It's like, you know, we're going to leave this class today, each and every one of us. And we're going to be inspired. We're going to talk about internal work. We're going to feel proud that we learned the story of Yitzchak. We learned the idea of being a pnimi. But what are we going to do with it? Depends on what.
You have to do a lot.
Rachel says not much. I hope it won't be forgotten. But in order for something, in order for
it's not going to be for
no, of
nothing.
course not. But in order for
wonderful.
something to last, there has to be a vessel to catch it.
Yes.
And for each and every one of
We are
us,
the vessels.
the passion is number one. That's what gives the inspiration. But what causes it to be maintained?
Memory.
Memory plus God. What about he's working in you? He keeps you excited.
And whoever it was that was in the army came home alive. When my husband was in Vietnam, I made him a sweater. Because of that, it was going to bring you up.
It was going to bring
Interesting.
you what?
Well, he would bring them home.
So what do you ladies think? What do you think is the vessel in our lives endurance that being the well?
Yes.
How do we work on ourselves
Awareness.
that
Study.
how do we do internal work?
By we study.
Fundament.
Yeah,
Foundation. That's the correct word.
Yeah, you're right.
If you don't have foundation,
I don't know.
You have to dig inside yourself.
Yeah, it's shaking.
Yeah.
I got you.
Gem inside of us that we don't quite understand. It's glowing,
Foundation.
bright. We can call it faith. We can call it hope. We can call it a knowing, a yearning.
Yes.
So what you're saying,
Yes,
you're referring probably to the spark of the neshama, the thing that inspires us, that pintalayid, that spark within each and every one of us that inspires us, that wakes up at different times. But what causes it to endure? If you think back to your life, let's talk specifically within the framework of Judaism and our connection to Hashem. Think of something in the past 10 years of your life, or 5 years, that you have Yiddishkeit,
That you
that
have what?
you have grown in your connection to God, that you have grown in your personal.
Having
What
knowledge.
is it that made it enduring?
It's my knowledge.
Faith is not enough.
It's my
You
knowledge
said
of what.
faith is not enough?
And knowledge is not enough. There are many
but-
people that know a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but it's also getting
What is it?
deeper into it.
How you want it to be.
So desire is absolutely, in fact, it says in the Talmud, nothing stops a person in front of their will. And we know that with anything in life, you have to first have a desire for it.
You have to have a
But
desire.
more than a desire, what else?
So what about if we
Perseverance. You have to keep at it.
What if people are just lucky and things happen at the right time?
Frozen.
What is it?
You there you go. Now you're back.
Oh, what makes something last? You know,
Connection to higher power.
but is that enough, Mira? Mira says a connection to a higher power. Is that enough to make it endure?
It explains lots of things.
Yes.
Yes.
It has to be fed.
It has to be, you gotta give it thought, you gotta give it sustenance, you gotta.
It gives you an answer, sometimes
It's
not.
gotta.
It's a combination of things. Oh, they're frozen again.
Yeah.
It's a combination of things. I think study is a huge element because knowledge is very powerful in the sense of when you know, then you can't unknow. See, once you, it's a whole different ball.
History teacher, every time we left the classroom, he said knowledge is power.
It is for negative and positive. So knowledge is a big thing. Sitting around and learning together as a group, studying Torah, Hashem's wisdom, the blueprint of our lives, that plants seeds into our brain, into our psyche. Certain things happen that you're walking down the street or you're having an experience, and all of a sudden a lesson that we spoke about in class will come up, right? I'm sure that it has happened. It happens to me all the time. So what's interesting is that Judaism has a goal to be tikkun olam, right? To fix this world, to transform it to a world that recognizes Hashem. But there's also an internal goal. There's also a goal that represents the digging, represents never putting down that shovel, that represents never forgetting that we need to work on ourselves. The minute we put down the shovel and we're all smug and we know it all, we're a done deal.
Yeah.
We are constantly needing to work on ourselves. And by the way, there's different ways to do that. For some, it's personal introspection, taking upon ourselves a new resolution, a new mitzvah, once a year on your birthday, once a month on Rosh Chodesh, which today is Rosh Chodesh. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Rosh Chodesh is the first day of the new month. We're supposed to make a personal cheshbon hanefesh. You know that in Judaism, the way you celebrate a birthday, there are 10 special things you're supposed to do on a birthday, but one of them is making a personal introspection, like we do. It's like your mini Yom Kippur or your mini Rosh Hashanah, where you think to yourself, what do I want out of my life? What am I doing? What am I accomplishing? What am I here for? Another element about digging is not just looking deep inside ourselves, but also adding mitzvahs in our life. You know,
What do you mean by mitzvahs?
the commandments that Hashem has given us for a Jew, the 613 mitzvahs, for a non-Jew, the 7 Noahide laws. The beauty of a mitzvah, and I have to say, the older I get, the more I appreciate the idea of a mitzvah. What do I mean by that? The repetition of a mitzvah that becomes part of your life, becomes ingrained in your psyche. You know, when you grow up every morning saying Moda'ani from when you're a young child, Nachum this morning, he's like, can't even say the words. He's like, he says it. He doesn't know what he's saying, but he knows he's thanking Hashem this morning. And I could promise you in 30 years, Nachum's thank you to Hashem will be a lot more meaningful probably, or different. But that repetitive behavior of a mitzvah is something that creates a vessel of endurance. You know, the idea of meditating on top of a mountain in India, not such a Jewish concept.
Get a bit of revelation and that moves you, lights you, and you move
Well,
on.
like Abby said, you always need the passion and the inspiration. Hashem, it's like so brilliant. Hashem, no, really, it's like sometimes it's like mind-boggling how brilliant. We're so lucky. We are so lucky.
It's a mitzvah.
We got
Doesn't know what the mitzvah
a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is one of the commandments.
Oh, okay. Understanding.
To do good
But
deeds.
understanding it.
Do good
Well,
deeds.
that's actually an interesting point. Greta asked, "Is a mitzvah? Do you have to understand what you're doing?" Actually, not. See, the mitzvah is that vessel.
It's
the
doing something
vessel.
you're supposed to do.
It's creating a vessel. The inspiration fills that vessel with understanding, with passion, with knowledge, and they're both important. The nasa and the nishma,
To me,
the
it's
doing and the understanding. It's not necessary.
Understand something, I get very excited about it
Yeah.
and want to go deeper.
But let me ask you, Greta, this is so off topic, but let me just ask you a question. If we only did stuff that we understood or that we were inspired by, is that enough?
Well, it inspires you to go deeper.
What if you're not inspired?
Well, I think you have to be inspired.
But what if you're not and your kids need supper?
I can't be. When I get a revelation, I get so excited.
I understand, but about a different element about inspiration moves you to do more and to keep finding inspiration. And by the way, I agree with Greta what she's saying about in our lives, we need to keep looking for inspiration. If you're feeling numb inside or dead inside, and we all go through that. We all go through
Like
Periods,
you have
periods,
nothing
yeah.
looking forward to.
with
like waves.
yeah, and absolutely, we go through waves. I'm sure each and every one of you have experienced a drought where your well was empty, and you felt, you know, we all go through that. That's just the reality of the way we're created. But Hashem is telling us, like Yitzchak, go deeper, because in that well there's water. And even I want to bring out something else that's very interesting. Even Avraham, who dug this well, his well got plugged, but Yitzchak had to redig it. Sometimes people rely that their Judaism comes from their parents. You know, the Judaism that my mother had, that my father had, that's Judaism is enough for me. But you cannot inspire the next generation unless you make it your own. In fact, on a personal level, I feel like this is a conversation I have with many people. And that is that even if you're raised in an observant Jewish home, Because at the end of the day, you cannot continue to be inspired. You can't live on your parents' inspiration and on your parents' actions. Yes, it influences you. Yes, it has a very big role in your life. But at the end of the day, you have to dig your own well. Because look, Avram's well got plugged. It didn't last. Yitzchak had to come and redig it, which shows us that we have to, each and every one of us.
With Isaac?
With Isaac it lasted, and we're going to talk about that. Yes, Abby.
When you were talking about the repetition of the commandments and of the things that we do repeatedly, I feel that it's doing for me, I look at it like a piece of land, and as water, let's say water from the well, Hashem is cutting through the land, like making a stream. And the more I study, the more I read from this, and it's a pathway. And the more I repeat, the pathway gets refined, it gets smoother. The jagged edges are almost gone. And,
yes.
And therefore, when I am upset, I can say, where's that light switch? Where's that thing? And I can flip it and I can get on that pathway.
Yes. Like we all do.
Like we all do. But,
forever.
But at least there's
forever
a semblance of a pathway.
Yes.
A pathway.
Yes. And it's like in right? Like when you're trying to, sorry, I feel like, you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
In psychology, the idea of creating pathways, are you familiar with that? Repetitive behaviors, when you're trying to teach a child or really anybody, ourselves as well, it's like circuits of psychological pathways, where neural pathways, where by every time you repeat the same behavior, that's exactly what you're saying, will make it easier each and every time. So Yitzchak understands that we don't take Judaism for granted. It's not going to serve if you don't give it an experience on your own, if you don't dig it on your own. But he doesn't just change the name, he redigs the well. And now we can understand the names of the Shava and the Sheva, because Avraham, he had the handshake of the century. Think about it in our own diplomatic times. On the White House of Gerar, so to speak, on the lawn, the pictures, the press was there. Everybody was talking about it. Avram and Avimelech made peace. And he named it Beersheba, and the name didn't last. Politics, if I may say, are powerful, important, but transient. And the essence of Judaism cannot rely on a picture from the press. The essence of Judaism cannot rely on a picture from the press.
Or anything right now.
Well, no, but
what do you mean by that?
What I mean to say is that within our political world, and there are many Jews that get involved in politics and move. By the way, those are important things in the world we live in today. In fact, side point, this is so far-fetched, but I'm going to try. If it doesn't make sense, forget I ever said it.
Try it.
Just inspiration.
Yes.
Let me try to ground it. Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov was the one who dwelled in the tent. Yitzchak was the one, Esav was the hunter. He was out there in the world. His whole life, Yaakov dwelled in the tent. Came time to get the blessing of being the Jewish people, told him, you got to have the hands of Esav. Not the voice, but the hands. Yes, the voice of Torah is important and eternal, but don't forget that there is an element of Esav within us that we should not sit back and allow the world to trample upon us. People respect Jews who respect themselves. We do need to fight against terror, against anti-Semitism, And sometimes within politics themselves, this is the way and the route to go. Taram. It's interesting. It's in this week's Parsha. Not a bad connection, huh? But let's bring it back over here. Is that there is room for the grand handshake and the big flash along the newspapers like Avram did, a big celebrity. But the essence of Judaism cannot rely on this. We need within each and every one of ourselves and Judaism as a whole, we need this inner vitality. And you can't inspire the youth with the photo.
You can't what?
Inspire the youth with a photo. I personally know many people who come over to me and they tell me, I don't understand. Why does my child not care about Judaism in Israel? They went to summer camp. And it's heartbreaking because people invest in their children. They want to know, why is it not lasting?
Why?
Because the inner vitality not come from an outer experience. It has to be your own well.
Yes.
We have to teach children
How
to
do you
dig
get that in
within.
a child?
It starts with education.
Schools.
It starts with education.
You said cool?
Schools,
Oh, school.
they destroy your kids
Look,
if it's not Jewish.
Oh, the schools are terrible now.
that's a broad statement that a school destroys your child, but because I would rather
Nowadays,
say education is so powerful that it can make you or break you. Education can literally make you or break you.
And it's getting worse
And bringing the idea, you know, the Rebbe was very, 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 the Rebbe was very, was the one who begged for the moment of silence in public schools. Says you don't have to pray to God, but you need to find, you need the Rebbe, the Lubavitch, begged for the moment, begged for the moment of silence, and he begged that if kids had a moment before they started their day, every day, they closed their eyes and they connected with a higher power, and they realized the idea that I am here for a reason. There's a higher power that cares about me, that put me in this world with a purpose and a mission. And I live a life above me and my ego. But there's something greater. There would be a lot less violence. There would be a lot less hate from something so simple.
Can I say something?
Yes, just give me 1 second.
Cool. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, today, Rosh Chodesh Kislev is the first day of the Hebrew month of Kislev. And this is a day of celebration. Why? Because the Rebbe, 28 years before his passing, suffered a severe heart attack that the doctors did not think he would survive. And it happened at a heart attack. That was at the end of his life. He had a heart attack. And it was at Simchas Torah in the shul. He had a heart attack. And they set up a mini hospital in 770 upstairs 6 weeks before. And on Rosh Chodesh Kislev, the doctors declared him well enough to actually go home. And I think Rabbi posted on the WhatsApp, so take a moment to his doctor talk about the miracle of this. And we celebrate this day because we had the Rebbe for another 28 years. And a lot of the teachings that we as a group do are based on these teachings that the Rebbe has given us. It's been a great gift for us as a people. And the Rebbe was the one who inspired us to be like Yitzchak. You know, there's a time and a place for everything. There's a time to be like Avram. There's a time to be like Yitzchak. And then we'll get to Yaakov. He's next week's Parsha. And Sarah and Rivka and Rachel, each one brings another message to us. But Yitzchak doesn't call Be'er Sheva because of the oath. And by the way, Yitzchak was no small diplomat. He doesn't call it Be'er Sheva because of the oath, the reason of the Shiva. He calls it because of the Sheva, because of the 7. He doesn't do it because of the oath. And by the way, he wasn't like such a, I didn't know about being a diplomat. He was a very good diplomat. He was able to get Avimelech to have this whole situation. In fact, what we read that they On verse 30, Yitzchak made a feast and they ate and they drank. He knew exactly what he needed to do to get Avimelech to listen, to seal the deal. He knew how to make the feast, but he never failed to remember what values and real tradition. And actually, one of the verses say right before we go to prayer, at the end, right before we say Hamapil, we say Biyatcha Afkid Ruchi, which is the prayer. Hebrew word for well is Beis Aleph Resh, Be'er. The word Biyatcha is for Biyatcha Afkid Ruchi, which means in your hands I deposit my spirit. Every night before we go to sleep, we tell Hashem, in your hand,
in your hands,
I deposit my spirit. I'm going to sleep now. I'm giving it back, so to speak, to you to give back to me. So what this idea is that the idea of the well is that he will to be able to give us that power to dig deep and to create those vessels that we need to create the internal structure in our lives and in the lives of everyone around us, because the idea of internal structure is really something that we need collectively as a nation. Internal values more now than ever before. Eternal values, and inside of ourselves, to become a pnimi, to become somebody who works on themselves, somebody who's an oived, somebody who works on themselves. You know, a person who think about someone in your life, someone you know, that's always working on themselves. How humbling to know such. They're so humble.
A person that's working on themselves.
Who works on themselves. Person who wants to be better, who wants to grow, who's constantly looking to create those new pathways. And this is why.
And searching for purpose.
And always. And finding it.
Peace, but it's human, I think, desire to reach out and to connect to others and do something purposeful.
Always. Every person wants to have meaning in their lives. And that is why the name Beersheba stuck by Yitzchak and not by Avram. Not because Yitzchak was a better in our lives, is that what lasts? Internal digging. The more we dig, the more we'll find, and the more it will last. So that's just one class of 3 lines of the Parsha.
I know, right?
I encourage you to keep reading, because there's so much richness in our lives.
You know, I've been reading the Torah in English for 3-4 years now. It's not the same. If you know Hebrew and you read the Torah, it's completely different. I mean, I'm watching my husband learn. I'm like, how did you get this now? And I get the same thing every time I read it through the commentary, but it's not the same if you know Hebrew. So I would recommend people to.
There's a way to dig deeper.
So you read it in Hebrew?
No, in English.
And he gets it deep.
Anything that you have
deeper, and it's always different every year.
Language. It's the word. It's the language of Hashem.
Yeah.
So each word in Hebrew. Look, we just spoke about, and we had a whole hour discussion on it. I mean, on one just on the vowel.
Just on what?
The vowel. I mean, the richness and the depth in our Torah, in our blueprint. It's like our whole life. Just open the book.
Well, the alphabet is very, very deep.
But don't be discouraged. Yes, Hebrew is good to know. Yes, Hebrew gives us a richer perspective. But in today's day and age, there's no excuse. So many. There's so many. You know,
you actually learn Hebrew words. That's how I know a lot of Hebrew words, because I listen to a lot of rabbis in my free time, And you don't have to be like in front of something.
Right.
You can be doing things, plug it in,
Yeah.
start listening,
Yeah.
and you learn a lot.
Yes.
And you learn Hebrew little
I can
words
promise you,
and
you're
things
never
like
going to
that.
forget the word Sheva or Be'er.
Well, ask us next
What's the
class.
word?
and you'll
Oh,
see.
Sheva's the name of the
I'm sure we
well?
will.
Yeah, Be'er is the well, and Sheva is either it could be 7 or it could be an
I still
oak.
don't know the names.
So let's take a moment, everybody. I'll give you homework each week. I'll give
Yeah.
ourselves homework. Let's think one area in our life that we want to dig deeper.
Food for thought, right? Like you said, 'cause we're
Think for
hungry.
yourself. What is something in our life we want to dig deeper? And for some, it can be just introspection on where they're at, what they're doing with their life, a decision that they want to make in that area.
Mhm.
For some, it could be being honest with themselves about a mitzvah that they want to take, that they've been pushing off for too long. For some, it can be, what do I want to add? People, we're all in different circumstances. We're all on our own journey.
Mhm.
But Hashem tells us that's okay. We each have our own well.
Mhm.
Just dig deep and we'll find it.
Thank
So
you,
you
amazing
are
class.
welcome.
Are
We
finished?
are going to have class, of course, next Tuesday. For those that did not receive the invitation, I hope you did. We're having Levi's bar mitzvah celebration here next Thursday.
What is that? What
We're
is,
all
what is
invited.
it that
Where you need to
I wouldn't know how
He's
to
going to
spell.
read from the Torah. He's going to get an aliyah.
what is an aliyah?
He gets honor
To the
after
Torah.
you become bar mitzvah.
So this is a transition. I
Nice to
see.
see you,
But what is,
ladies.
I don't understand exactly.
Hopefully next week
And
too.
then, so that's
More,
next.
bigger table. Everybody online, come over here.
Everybody online, it was so good to see you.
Good seeing you.
And,
Thank you so much. It
Thank
was
you.
amazing.
Thank you. See you next
I learned a lot today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
everybody.
I hope we'll work on the connection being a little bit stronger next.
It's probably because the router is.
Maybe get the.
Very interesting.
Oh, run.
Okay. Have
Take
a good
care.
night. Tell them to say hi. Oh, and Mazel Tov on the grandchild.